morning. It is now September 11th. Beautiful morning out here, a little bit cooler than we're used to. Nighttime temperatures now are getting down into the single digits, but we still have not had any frost, and we might still be a week or more away from that yet at this time. But right now, as you can see behind me, there is still some standing canola, hasn't been combined yet. Let's take a closer look at this one. This field was seeded at the same time as a lot of other canola in the area. However, it was on irrigation, and we didn't have irrigation water in this area for a while, so it didn't emerge all that great, but it did come up pretty good once we did finally water it. But you can see, you know, as far as external color change in these pods, they look mature, but they are still quite leathery. They're still a ways away from being harvestable, and there is still some greener plants kind of mixed in here. You can see we got some green pods here, so we're still probably, you know, at least 10 to 14 days away from combining in this field yet, but right now it's still looking pretty good. We just need to be a little patient with it. Well, this week there's a lot more volunteer becoming apparent. This is wheat, and you can see we have a pretty good stand of volunteer wheat starting to emerge here, as well as we got, you know, some regrowth on the kochia, stuff like that too. A lot of this kochia was relatively small and was actually underneath the crop, but now that it's exposed and it's got a little bit of rain, it is starting to green up. So if we want to stop that from setting seed, we need to give her a spray. Here we have a field of silage oats. This was seeded with a forage type brassica, and you can see it's doing not too terribly bad. It's fairly short, but you can see the leaves on the brassica have been chewed up pretty good, and there's multiple insects here. We do have quite a few flea beetles in here, as well as you can see we've got some army worms in here as well, so these guys are feeding in here. There's also quite a few grasshoppers still in here. You know, of course, the grasshoppers are moving into anything that's green this time of the year, so we are still fighting with them a little bit in here. But with this, like, this field is just for silage, so it's really not worth any sort of control measure to get these guys under control at the moment. Well, it's that time of the year that harvest samples are starting to accumulate in guys' sheds, so I've got my barrels on board today. I just finally finished emptying these out from last year's samples. I collect a lot of grain samples after they're done their use at farms, basically. Mix them all up in these tubs, and this supplements my chickens' layer diets. So usually I get about 3 of these barrels filled every fall, and that usually does me for about a year. Well, here by Nobleford this morning, corn is looking good. You can really see by the appearance of the husks, things are starting to dry down a bit in here. So when you open these guys up now, you can definitely, like, that milk line is really on the move. We're not at black layer yet, or even really close to it yet, but we are really starting to drop moisture now in these guys. So we'll be starting silage on this week. Pro tip for any agronomists looking to speed up their time in a cornfield: if you don't want to be shucking out each individual ear to check for maturity, you can just get yourself a nice little pocket knife like this Cold Steel Espada here, which folds out to a relatively impressive size and a double-handed grip, and then you can use that to chop through and take your samples. Now you can just grab the kernels and check to see what stage they're at. No shucking required. Here we have a field of cereal stubble. This was worked about a week ago and irrigated, and it has not been seeded yet. We're just getting things prepared to do that. Right now I'm just out checking it for weeds. There is a few patches of mallow and kochia, but the main concern really is these patches of wild oats that are really starting to pop up here and there. A lot of them are only just coming through the ground, but there's quite a few once you get looking in the field here. So we are going to take care of these guys in the next couple days before we seed. We want to make sure we reduce the competition to the fall treated kale as much as possible and get off to a good start. Well, I'm out in that cornfield, but that got hailed out back in June, and things in here are looking not too bad. Now, this is sorghum. In this side of the field was reseeded into sorghum. There is some surviving corn. You can see this tassel right in front of me here. This, you know, corn plant did recover somewhat, but it's only about 6 feet tall. I don't think it's even... yeah, it hasn't even set an ear on it, so it's pretty much empty. But surrounding it is all this sorghum, which is looking wonderful. It's a really thick crop, and you can see here we do have... I just sliced the stem open. You can see the head there. It's still a little ways away from emergence. It looks like there's a couple leaves to go yet before it does emerge. So, you know, could potentially still be 2 weeks or even a little bit more away from head emergence. But this was seeded at the end of June, but it's looking pretty good. I mean, lots of this sorghum now is as tall as I am, so there's going to be a pretty good amount of biomass in here. Here we got some freshly seeded fall rye getting irrigated. It's looking pretty good. Some of it is starting to germinate. This one here is just starting to pop here. It's seeded into a good depth. good moisture, and more moisture is on its way. You can see we do have some volunteer barley and stuff like that here. That has been sprayed out a few days ago, but we do have some new stuff that is starting to emerge here since spraying, but hopefully it won't be too bad. Here are some very nice looking silage oats growing. These guys are about waist high on me, nice and thick, just starting to hit the milk stage. I do have quite a bit of aphids in here, so there is some larger ones flying around, and then ones like this, which are just hiding out on the leaves. And because of that, we do have a pretty high concentration of ladybugs in here. There is quite a few that you see as you're walking around. Most of the larvae are lower down in the canopy, protecting from aphids down there. I'm out here in an irrigated timothy field, and we have these patches of crop here that's not looking all that good. And it's quite interesting when we get digging around in here and pulling stuff up. There is a very high amount of cutworms in here. Let's see if I can find a few in this patch. Yeah, so here we go. We got one cutworm right there. Here's a couple more right down here. So they're still relatively small, these guys. You can see they've got an orange head, a relatively translucent pale body, and they have legs going all of the way down. So when I initially saw pictures from this field, I believed these might have been grubs, either from Japanese beetle or a June bug. But if that was the case, they would only have legs right at the very front of their body. They would have, 3 sets of legs, 6 legs in total at the front. These guys have legs all the way down. Definitely makes them a cutworm. Not 100% sure on the variety of cutworm, but I'll probably know more by the time I edit this video and I've had time to compare to some pictures. I'm actually kind of glad that it's cutworms and not June bugs or Japanese beetles, just because they are a lot more difficult to control, being a subterranean larvae that never surfaces to feed. Cutworms come up and feed basically at the soil surface, which does make it possible to chemically control them if we have to. Got some silaging going on this morning. Some of this corn is starting to come off, looking not too bad so far. This field had a little bit of irrigation problems, so it's drying down a bit faster than some of the others in the area, but overall I think it's coming off not too bad. Here by Monarch is this pretty impressive looking field of millet. This is on dry land and it's looking really good. Millet is pretty drought tolerant and does pretty well in hot temperatures. You can see there is a little bit of difference in staging between some of these heads. Some are really starting to ripen and dry down. Others are still quite green. If you're not familiar with millet, it is a grain. The seeds look quite different compared to something like wheat or barley. Yeah, really interesting crop. I hope we see more of this in the area in the future. It looks like it's doing pretty good. And that'll be it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.